So yeah, feel free to jump in anytime. I assume you guys can see my slides. Yeah. So Steve will appreciate this because he's also a guy from New England. So you know, I started in the Boston area, grew up out there, did my undergrad in Chicago, and then came out to Tucson for grad school. So I was here in the 90s, got my MBA in entrepreneurship and marketing, and during that time, as a student, I helped launch NeighborNet, which you know, if we had done it 10 years later, might have been like the next door kind of app that you see now. But after that, I got involved in a product launch called Sir Arthur Software. And back in the 90s, you may remember Microsoft Access really sucked to use, right? It wasn't like a no-brainer that you just go in and build. So a developer had built a kind of a layering process for an easy access type of product. And we rolled it out, and here's my UA Center for Innovation connections. So the year that Tucson Technology Incubator launched, we were the first applicant to the Tucson Incubator, which became AZCI, which became UA Center for Innovation. So we actually decided not to join the incubator at the time because we were going through major pivots, because every time we would take this off-the-shelf product, right? This is back in the era of CompUSA and Gateway Country and stores like that. And every time we went to a client, like we had a meeting with Honeywell executives about how we could roll this out. And they're like, yeah, we love it, but we'd love it even more if it could do this. Could you customize it? Could you do this? Could you do this? And we were trying to do an off-the-shelf product, and it would have been better if in a cloud era, we had rolled it out in where we could do fast iteration on really small apps that we could roll out. So too early for the time that it was, and a product came along called Evernote, which had a lot of the same core functionality of being able to drop photos, notes, images, emails all into one. And we had built that layering, but again, timing is everything in entrepreneurship, right? So around the time that we were pivoting and trying to figure out what's next, all the co-founders in that had offers, and I had this company in Nebraska reach out to me because one of their owners was here in Tucson. And they said, hey, you know, we're trying to figure out this whole new thing called internet marketing. We understand you have a little background in that. I'm like, sure, let's take a look. Maybe I can help you out as I'm figuring out some in-between stuff. And they had me take a look at their internet marketing, and I came back with some recommendations. I think you really need to think about pivoting where you go with this publication and where you're going with your business model, because if any of you have ever been to Nebraska, everything is about Huskers, right? Like the Husker football team, and there were 12 different publications at the time that wrote about Husker football. And so what was interesting in this publication was they had high school athletes of the month, and they did some other collegiate sport coverage. So I said, why don't you guys become the Sports Illustrated of the state, but become really comprehensive? Well, a week later, they called me back and they said, hey, we really loved your marketing pitch. Do you want to come run the company? So I was like, sure, why not? Like, so I moved to Omaha for a couple of years, ended up taking a 7-year-old startup. We actually got it back to break even within a short amount of time, and that was a whole journey. But then 9/11 hit, and within 72 hours, I lost 60 to 70% of my advertisers, and we basically folded the company a month later. That's how fast that moment in time impacted. So 9/11 hits. I started thinking, well, do I move back to Tucson, go to Boston, Chicago? And my fiance at the time, who now my wife, we decided Chicago's probably going to rebound a little faster. So why don't we make that move? So I got to Chicago, and I ended up spending a decade basically teaching and consulting. When I first got there, post 9/11, you know, I was a young entrepreneur, a generalist in a ultra specialist market, right? So what's your value proposition, right? When people are looking for a decade of industry experience, right? And so what I found was a lot of nonprofits were having to pivot at the time. So they were bringing me in to help think about leveraging their assets for new revenue streams, how to create multiple streams of revenue beyond traditional government grants. And so I worked with both small entities at the time, like Holiday Home Camp, one of the oldest camping groups in the country up in Wisconsin, to March of Dimes based out and their operations out of Chicago. But then my old alma mater called, and you know, and this is life, right? Like you never know who you're going to sit next to. And I ended up becoming the associate dean director of their business school. They called me up and said, "Hey, we need somebody to be half faculty, half operations, manage faculty, curriculum, but we need somebody to be entrepreneurial in helping us rethink our direction." So I ran that program for a few years. I moved into university administration, and then around 2009, you may remember, we had an economic down cycle, right? And the Chicago River overflowed their banks, so we had multi-million-dollar loss. We had the endowment go flat, and then our admissions went flat, right? So we called it the trifecta, right? Like here's the three pieces that hit the U. So at the time we started restructuring, and what I ended up doing is pivoting, right, on the career front. And I still taught for the U, but I jumped out and got into consulting, and that's where a lot of my consulting at the time, if you think of 2009, 2010, healthcare organizations were having to respond to ACA. So I started getting brought in as a marketing and strategist to help a lot of senior homes, hospitals, et cetera, try to figure out how to move forward in the new ACA model and what that looked like. And also kept working with a lot of nonprofits, and what I would say is social or mission driven businesses at the time. So a lot of startups in that space. And then around 2011, my wife and I just had our first child. We started thinking about what's next. So we decided to move to Tucson. So that's what brought us back. So I was still consulting. And then so for the first 4 or 5 years back in Tucson, I was still primarily consulting. But then in 2015, a buddy of mine called and needed help writing a business plan, right? And it ended up he was building a plan to connect real estate development projects to lenders and investors, and creating a due diligence platform, not too far off from tools you would see used by Desert Angels, things like that, but more geared for the real estate market. But we built the platform, and Tucson actually became our first launch market. We actually had a couple members of the Desert Angels invest in the company. We got a few of our first major clients here. And then the company continued to grow, and it's become more of a private white label product. So there's a wealth management firm out of Boston that now leverages our platform, and then the Select USA group is using it for site selection for companies that are looking at new location, and they do all their due diligence in our platform, very visual. And while I was on staff for a couple of years, I stepped out of that because McGuire Center came along, and I had the opportunity to start teaching. By the time I was up to my third kid, traveling all the time did not make as much sense. My wife was maybe wanting to see me around a little bit more, and so I joined McGuire. And while Stage Exchange is still going, and I still have my investment in the company and all that, and still support them, that was a great opportunity for me to pivot. While I was at McGuire, I taught for a few years, but I also helped work in the Eller Social Innovation Program, helped work with Microsoft on their Cloud for Good and strategies, and we connected students there. Became the interim director for a year and a half, most recently, and then started working on 10 West Festival. Like that was the connect the dot on how I got involved there with the Social Impact Summit, and then co-chaired the 10 West Festival for 2 years. And then I've also been on the board for the UA STEM Learning Center, still doing some board work in the community. And then I also am a instructor for Boots to Business on their international military bases. So I do a lot of veteran entrepreneurship work through that. I've been doing some of the I-Corps programs. I'm a fellow at Babson in their social innovation programs, and then the geek side of me comes out. I'm a Lego instructor, and I also do a lot of pop culture and innovation talks. So that was like the last decade in Tucson, and some of you know me, and you were like, yeah, you were kind of crazy. You were everywhere, right? And then in January, kind of made a pivot. And so this is where, like, you never know where opportunities are going to come from. But I had worked with Caterpillar in 2019 as a innovation mentor while I was with the McGuire Center, and then in October they started recruiting me, and I was like, no, I'm good. And then November came along, and they started talking about some other things. So I ended up joining Caterpillar in January. They put together a good package. When I first, and now I manage the learning and development programs for the mining division, basically resource industries for Caterpillar. So everything from leadership, innovation, lean. In the context of lean here is more lean operations, lean engineering, and a whole host of other mining programs. So I still work with U of A and their mining engineering programs, the Lowell Institute, stuff like that. The other crazy pivot this year is my wife's entrepreneurship and venture development has taken off. And some of you may know Erica from her first venture, Bralessly, that she launched. She was actually the winner of the idea funding. Idea fund. I'm like, I should know this. I helped run the event a couple years ago. Idea funding pitch competition, and Bralessly has been doing great. But then in terms of pivoting, right, then her manufacturer came along and decided to retire this spring. And then a couple other businesses have come along. And so Erica ended up putting together the Sonoran Stitch Factory that just launched September 1. And it is a full service cut and sew manufacturing company. So she's still running Bralessly. She now has about 15 employees working for her through the manufacturing hub, 25,000 square foot building here in Tucson. She's partnering with a number of groups, and it's literally everything from design and pattern making all the way to fulfillment, shipping, so there's even clients that it's a full service operation. So she actually manages their e-commerce, their web platforms, and sends out orders every day. So that came together through the purchase of there's one business here in Tucson already acquired, one in El Paso that we moved here as part of that, and there's one acquisition and two brands that will be announced by the end of the year as part of that. So, so on the family side, we launched Varsol Ventures as our holding company, and we decided to move. So Erica is now the entrepreneur of the family. I'm the chief janitor and bottle washer, and I clean the floors on the weekends. But yeah, talk about a pivot, right? Like, so yeah, a year ago I was the entrepreneur guy around town, and now Erica is. But I think family stuff. The reason I bring that up is at the end of the day, right? Family is a major part of an entrepreneur's life, right? And you all know that, right? You're working crazy hours and trying to find that work-life balance, and in my journey, right, I've never been the traditional career ladder. I'm definitely not the traditional Caterpillar employee. I've got plenty of stories about how crazy it is to be a mid-career hire here, but I am having a great time introducing innovation and social impact strategy here at Caterpillar. So, so the reason I share my story is I think it's always important for folks to understand, like, you know, entrepreneurship for me has been everything from small business to early stage, right? Going out, getting the first round of funding at 300, 400, 500,000 to raising a couple million to, and then also like different types of ventures. Like a lot of my consulting, there were some ventures that I helped people launch on the nonprofit side, where then the next one came along and I recommended the other side, or doing an L3C model or different kinds of models there. And there are a couple nonprofit initiatives I'm part of right now, which are going through the same thing, you know, where it's no longer to me about business nonprofit structure as much as it is about scalable impact, right? And So I've been fortunate in my career to have had a couple small wins. We haven't had that monster win yet, you know, where I'm self-funding everything. You know, we've done well enough that this year, Erica's been able to do some acquisitions, and we've been able to privately fund that. So that makes a huge difference in our ability to get that going. And who knows, maybe she'll hire me in a year, you know, so we'll see. But you know, the reason I bring all of that up is as we think about value proposition, there have been a lot of times where, you know, a big part of the entrepreneur experience is truly sitting down and understanding what is it that you're trying to solve for your customer, right? And we get locked in, like here at Caterpillar, we lock into this is the way the mining industry works and this is the way Caterpillar works. And there's been times where, being the new person in the room, I'm able to ask some simple questions and people go, huh, maybe we should rethink that. Maybe it isn't a product sell anymore. Maybe we need to focus more on service sell, and maybe we need to think about holistic sales and consultative sales, and changing like the way that instead of selling machines, we're going in and selling our experts, right? And sure enough, one of the big growth areas in 2020 for Caterpillar has been in services and consulting, because mine sites need wraparound services. And we also have like, one thing many of you probably don't know is Caterpillar has more autonomous vehicles on the road than the entire auto industry, right? It's just you don't get to see them because they're at mine sites, right? So when you think about the sheer volume, like we've had 2 billion tons moved at mine sites in our trucks through autonomous vehicles, right? And there's now just this year in Australia, there's a gold mine that is 100% automated now. And so this is, talk about like changing the direction of how mining is going to operate, and that's accelerated this year, right? So now the way that we talk about things like safety at a mine site and how autonomy solves safety is not the traditional value proposition when you talk to CFOs that are all about, like, you know, cost per ton, right? It was the way that most measure, right? So at the end of the day, value proposition is really getting and digging deep into what those needs, pain points, and what are the gains that you can try to create, and then how do you translate your solution into a story that resonates with folks, right? So now, because Anita sent me like the quick skinny on the program, I'm going to ask, like, have you guys spent time on business model canvas or lean canvas? Like, no, not at all. Oh shoot. Okay, I wish I had brought that slide. All right, so I'm going to reference the business model canvas. I'm going to say, Steve, you're in charge of sending that out to the group, because I
Yeah,
can do that as a guest speaker, right?
so Rick,
So
just as a reference, some of the folks have gone through ICOR, so they're
yeah,
very
yeah.
familiar with it, and others are brand new. So this is what
Okay.
we run into, because we do continuous, we're not cohort based. So,
Okay. Cool.
you know, so if y'all don't know what business model canvas is, make sure you ask Steve so he
Yep.
can give you a quick introduction.
Yeah, and see, as a guest speaker, I can assign homework to Steve. So I love that. I love being in this seat today. So no, so the business model canvas was a tool that was introduced back in 2011, and there's iterations on that, lean canvas, others. At the end of the day, the idea is present your business in one slide, right? And because people were spending so much time trying to present 30 pages of a business plan, and they couldn't tell a concise, quick story and use it for fast iterative design, right? So that's the fundamental reason you use a canvas. It's one tool in the entrepreneur's belt. It's not the tool. I believe it's one element you can use, but I am not, like, you'll read articles, the business plan is dead, or this is dead, or the pitch is dead. I'm like, bull crap. They're all tools that you need to understand and be able to leverage in your journey. Because what I find is folks that are 100% focused on these business model canvases, then they don't have the depth of thought that goes into having to really detail out their data, their research, and usually I can scratch the surface on these canvas presentations at a lot of these startup weekends, scratch it, and it's good for quick iterative design when you're at the very, very fuzzy front end. But if you're like a year into your venture, you got to have a lot more due diligence done to support it. And I saw that particularly in Stage Exchange when we were presenting ventures to investors, whether it was real estate or whatnot. The level of due diligence that goes into making an investment requires a lot more thought than just this pitch level high level, and you can tell kind of the flash and bang presentations versus those that have real depth of understanding of their customers in particular. Yeah, you know, investors that are really savvy will start tearing that apart really quickly. So with that, one of the things that I like in the canvases is just the quick, it creates a visual storytelling, right? So out of one of the elements of that is that you talk about your customer segments versus what's the value that you deliver, right? Those are two of the elements that are on every canvas that you'll find. And then there's a follow-on canvas called the value proposition canvas that basically is used with the business model canvas to force you to think more about what is it that you're trying to deliver for the customer. So on the right side of this model, you see customer jobs, gains, and pains. So what is it that the customer is trying to do, accomplish, right? So if it's mom trying to feed her kids, and what makes that process easier, right? Or maybe it's a company that is operating a mine site. What are the gains and pains that they're trying to create, and how? And then the question on the left side of this canvas is, how do you deliver gains? How do you solve for pain points? And if you can connect those dots and keep zeroing in, you're going to find that you're connecting the right narrative. So I'm going to use a story here from her. This is a Finnish company that I worked with. I think I worked with them back 2010, 2011, out of Finland, and they are the #1 fitness equipment seller in Scandinavian region, parts of Europe, and over in Japan and a lot of Asia Pacific countries. But horrible market penetration here in the US. Now, in the US market, and one thing I'll share is the equipment that they have is pneumatic air resistance based equipment. Anybody know what the hell that is? Okay, what's pneumatic air-based resistance equipment? I'm going to ask you. Yeah.
My wild guess is that there's like it's like a air pump, right?
Mm-hmm.
When how you pump up the bicycle tire.
Yeah.
It's in there, and you have to go against it.
Okay.
My wild
Anyone
guess.
else?
Sort of like what you use to close your door on the hatch, those like actuators. But
Good. Yep, exactly. Yeah,
So.
when you're closing the trunk on your car, right, and you got the pieces on the side that create a consistent level of pressure, so that for pulling or closing. Why do you think that's beneficial when you're exercising compared to other equipment?
Resistance.
Resistance. Why? Sorry, did you say resistance or?
Yeah, resistance.
Yeah, what?
Why? Because it builds your strength. It gives you the ability to work against it. Otherwise, it's too easy.
Ah, okay. And why is that better?
Resistance, right?
Oh,
Say that again, Steve?
it gives you a controlled, it doesn't jerk on you because you have to go at a certain, it controls the pressure you apply against it and the resistance you receive from it.
Yeah. Okay. How about others?
And also, if you let go, it doesn't like pop on you. Like
Okay.
it's slow, you know. It's
the weights will drop on you and can
right. The weights will just drop down, right? But this would just go slow.
Anybody else?
The resistance is rather constant throughout the motion.
Mm-hmm.
There, we needed the scientific.
Oh, sorry.
No. But that
formula. We have a formula. I just can't remember it.
yeah, but everybody's right on target, right? When you think about going to exercise, like there's a lot of equipment out there. Like if I'm doing a leg I don't exercise, so I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. But like if I'm doing a leg press, right, and I'm pushing my legs up using traditional weights, right, I have a lot of pressure when I start, and then it gets easier, and then as I lower my legs, the pressure increases. Well, what is best for physical rehab in particular, like if you're a senior that just had knee surgery, is you want consistent pressure throughout, so you're getting consistent gains for muscles, right? Does that make sense in terms of some of the benefit? And to everybody's point, like you don't get that kind of jerky motion that sometimes you get. Sometimes you get that with free weights, or sometimes you get it with other types of exercise equipment. And so there is a research-driven set of proofs that show, like, yeah, this is better. And because you can really lower the level of resistance, like you can get down to like half a pound of pressure and barely have any pressure on the system, and it's a nice smooth pressure, particularly for knee surgeries and rehab. Great equipment to use, right? So how do you think you go sell this in the US market? Ooh, didn't expect that one. I just saw people were like looking around, like, I'm like, no, you can't look at the other cubes.
Well, maybe you would go to, would you maybe think about trying to, a couple of things. One, you could go to Amazon, maybe see if you can strike a deal there. Another thing might be, would you try to maybe connect with someone like here, like an LA Fitness, and see if you could, a gym store, and see if you could, I guess, put some of your equipment in their gyms.
Right. Okay. How about others? Thoughts?
How
Maybe.
about physical therapy?
Okay.
Distributors.
Okay.
I mean, I would say, Rick, you would do some customer discovery to figure out what their pains and gains are, to learn more about the market, so you could figure out what segments you want to pursue.
Yeah. I mean, oh, go ahead.
How about starting with hotel gyms?
Hotel gyms. Okay, good. Others? Thoughts?
Someone had mentioned physical therapy. There's probably some association of physical therapists. Go in, talk to them about, and use that meeting as a conversation of both selling your product and demonstrating the smooth, consistent throw, while also being able to learn about kind of their pain points and why their members might want to use this.
Yeah, and I will say that so a lot of folks are right on. Well, one of the things I was trying to tease out is, who did you think the audience was for this, right? And it for this kind of equipment, which is also probably a 60-80% premium in pricing over other types of exercise equipment, it's not your consumer market, right? And so a lot of folks started realizing, yep, this is a B2B kind of sale. What kind of B2B, right? What kind of groups? And so, yeah, physical therapist or physical therapy related sites definitely became a high priority. And I think it was Philip that said, yeah, go talk to some PTs, find out their pains, gains, etc. And that was what HER was trying to do to sell their product, but they were failing miserably. So why do you think selling to physical therapists would be a difficult sell?
Competition.
Competition, okay.
I think because of the physical therapists deal with a lot of different kinds of injuries, not just leg injuries. And typically when they go to start off, they don't really have you use such equipment like that. It might be something a little simpler, just like a rubber band or something like that. This might be too much for physical therapy.
And could
They
it
don't
also
have
be,
pneumatics.
Oh, Andrea, go ahead.
I was like, could it also be because they're part of larger health organizations, so they aren't the decision makers on the types of equipment that are purchased?
Yeah, there we go. So decision making on equipment became a major factor in the US market. Who decides what equipment gets installed in a building?
The owner, the property owner, for the most part,
Yeah. And when does that decision making happen?
when they're under construction.
Yes, under construction, or they're doing a major renovation. So one of the things that HER found out is they're going to physical therapists. Andrea, great job, because what took them months to figure out, you just summarized in like 30 seconds, right? And so one of the things that they found was they were going out to all these PTs, and they're trying to sell to senior centers and retirement communities, and they're like, hey, we got great equipment. It's really easy. It's low thresholds. It's great, blah, blah, blah. Here's all the reasons. And they kept failing. Why? Because they kept going to the PTs. What they found is the physical therapists, while they were the ones that understood the product the best, they were not the decision makers. They were influencers, but it was not, that was not the group. They ended up having to go to contractors that specialized in building retirement communities, physical rehab centers, independent like orthopedic offices that also had PT attached. And then they found that, oh, now we're getting, you get, and in fact, in that mindset, like obviously contractors have a different mindset. What do you think an owner of a nursing facility, post-acute care type facility is looking for when they talk about rehab and exercise? What would an owner of a rehab facility want to see? Like what's their decision set? What are the pains and gains that they're looking for?
Maintenance cost.
Okay, what else?
Probably versatility, if it's, you know, treats a whole bunch of stuff versus just one area.
Okay. Others?
Success with the customer, so that there is feedback to whoever has ordered the physical therapy that it works.
Mm-hmm. And sorry, and Andrea, I think you were going to say something again.
Oh, I was just thinking of the amount of space the equipment takes up,
yep.
because they may not have the square footage for a large piece of equipment, depending on the size of the facility.
Yep, the controller and CFOs would always ask like square footage, like how do I maximize my space? What kind, like, so they do have different configurations. It's more than just like leg machines. They had upper body and back and all kinds of stuff. But what so those folks were thinking more square foot and cost. But the owners of rehab centers also have to think about their revenue streams. How does the revenue stream work for a rehab center like a post-acute when it comes to a patient that just got out of a knee surgery? Anyone know?
It's probably, you know, the capital equipment, if you get the Medicare code and all this stuff for it, versus how you can bill it to the insurance.
Yeah.
Really an insurance Medicare question, yeah.
Okay. And post ACA, what changed about that relationship of knee surgery, like hospital, rehab center, and what's that relationship like?
It became more of a customer decision as opposed to an insurance decision.
Yeah, that definitely was part of it, like customer choice.
The patient got to choose where they went for their services, as opposed to having that, what is it called, the referral process required.
Yeah. How about others? Any other?
Service. I would imagine it's more service, right? The hands-on, if they do hands-on stuff versus buying capital equipment, they may not be able to have anything to offset that with.
Well, they're concerned about reimbursement. So,
where are you going with that? Keep thinking about that for a second.
yeah, so if they want to get reimbursed by the insurance company or by the payers, there has to be a code attached to the piece of equipment, and then also attached to a diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
So
well, sorry, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I thought.
No, it's complicated.
Yeah.
So, and then of course you've got the liability issues and all that. So, I don't know. Do they? I haven't seen in nursing facilities these things, but I have not gone to rehab facilities.
Yeah. Well, and so yeah, one of the big things post ACA that happened to the way that revenues work is, let's say I go to a hospital and I have my surgery there, but I have stairs at home, so I can't go home. So I get sent to a post-acute care, like a nursing facility. In most knee surgeries, it takes 14 days for recovery. If I'm on a, let's say hip and knee, I'm in for 30 days, right? So what's interesting though, post-ACA, the hospital and the rehab center are paid based on success of that patient. If that patient ends up having to go to a hospital because of bed sores, follow-up, both pay rates decrease, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a commingled issue there now. And so hospitals and rehab centers started creating networks to ensure that the quality of care met a certain level, right? So when her realized, wait a minute, it's not just the PT folks that need, they're influencers now, right? Like we need to be able to show, yep, they will adopt, it'll be used. And there was a big issue of data. So her piece of equipment has data tracking that ties to both bracelets or to smartphones. So like a person can just tag a bracelet when they walk in and da-da-da. So the metrics are off the chart. But the reason that became popular for the decision makers was because it solved some of the metrics of how the patients were improving post-surgery at the orthopedic center or at the hospital. So everybody got better revenue and better margins at the end, right? But when you think about when we started on this conversation, like how would you sell this? Right? Everybody's like, oh yeah, you could go in, you could, oh, this is better for the person, it's better for this, but that's not the way this is sold in the US, right? Now that is how it sells in Europe because the health insurance system over there is different. Japan, it's all about the data. They absolutely love the fact that these machines have crazy data cranking out of it. Like, and the therapist can actually watch along with it and see where they're failing in terms of the resistance. So it created an opportunity to say, oh, if they're failing in the upper part of the leg press, we need to increase the amount of activities to help them with that part of their muscles, right? So the reason I wanted to share this example is here's a great example of a Finnish company trying to understand the US market. Post ACA, that was a hot mess, right? So this is why being able to go and do customer interviews and validate, how do you actually make a decision? When do you make a decision? Oh, it's usually new construction or you're renovating your entire facility. This isn't something people go, you know what, we have about 4 years into our equipment and we're just going to redo it all. Usually it's more of a piecemeal decision or it's part of an asset replacement plan, right? Like, okay, we've had the equipment for X years. Now we're going to be doing a major purchase. So creating influence along that path, but it's not the PT. It's actually like the controllers, the construction folks, the CFOs that you get the best bang for your buck, and the ones that are more focused on the revenue streams per se than just cost centers. So the reason I bring that up is most folks, when they're coming, like a lot of marketers would come in and go, okay, this is how we're going to market this to customers. And no, like marketing directly to seniors for this product was good when they were at a facility and they wanted to be able to sell within the facility why this equipment is going to be a better thing for you. So it became a facility benefit, but that didn't help at all in selling equipment. It was a way of the facility differentiating from other facilities in the area that had more inferior, right? So it became a selling point to the marketer of a nursing home, but as a marketer of her, I don't need to sell to seniors, right? It's not an emotive sell. It's not a brand sale, right? It is a financial decision, right? So the reason I brought this up, and let me try to fast forward here. So as you start thinking about customer jobs, right? Here's a B2B example where we start by talking about physical therapists, right? That's the entry point, right? And we're trying to work with seniors because they did identify seniors were the most likely to use this compared to like Bally's or 24-hour fitness or whatever the fitness company, the cool ones are these days, right? Because it's a different sell compared to like hammer or like strength equipment for bodybuilders. Clearly, I have no idea what I'm talking about on that side of the house. So you can't tell. Anyway, so functional jobs, like what are the tasks? What are they trying to do? What are their daily routines? How do I solve for that? Or what are how does this work socially? Is it a feel good? Is it security or like thinking Maslow's, right? Is it food, safety? Is it shelter, right? Like, but what are the jobs that they have to do? So how do you make it simpler for them to do their job? How do you make their job better or faster, or you create a different approach to the way that they do their daily routine or their daily job? So this gets back to pain points, right? Like, so what are the outcomes that aren't happening? What is it that isn't working? And then as you're coming up with potential solutions, hey, is this what you're looking for? How would it work? What would you like to see? Well, I like this. Well, maybe not this aspect. Well, maybe we take this, but not that. And that's where like these fast, agile methods come in, where you're going through quick design. You're going back with a lot of draft and a lot of prototype to be able to go get people to say, yeah, I like that or I don't. Right? Like with Erica and the Sonoran Stitch Factory, she has a lot of commercial and fashion clients, right? So even like cruise ships are one of her main customer groups right now, and they come in and they're looking for bed sheets and pillow covers that are hypoallergenic, that easy to wash, because they have to turn over these beds once a week very quickly, and they need durable sheets, right? And they need a sewing factory to be able to make these using polypropylene plastics, right? And see, this is where I need Eric on the call, but being able to quickly iterate, hey, here are some samples. Does this work? Blah, blah, blah. Hey, let's go put this on some beds. What do the people think? Okay, let's look at how fast you can change these over. Or like when a fashion designer comes in, right? Quickly putting up, like one of the clients that Erica had this past month was a military protective armor company. And you're like, what? Why are they coming to a sewing factory? Well, the vests are cloth and heavy sewing, right? Heavy stitching. But you're putting the Kevlar plates and sliding them into pockets that Velcro together, right? And then you can change out the plates over time. Well, the last company that did it, they did a beautiful job on the vests, but then the way that they sewed it up, you couldn't slide the the Kevlar in, that wouldn't fit, right? So they never actually tested the Kevlar in the actual pockets, and the way that it worked, the Kevlar would prevent the other plate from going in. So they ended up having to unstitch, redo, and basically save this military contract already. But it was hilarious to see, because if they had even done one practice run and sat down with the client and said, okay, put this on, show me how you put the Kevlar in, show me, like, should the Kevlar be here? Should it go across the stomach? What about the sides? How are you protecting a soldier there? You know, those are the quick iterative designs that you got to be able to test and say, now let's have some soldiers wear this for a day. Does it wear funny? Does it hurt in the shoulders? Are they finding the seams are coming undone? You know, one of the seams used a certain type of stitching, and first time Erica saw it, she's like, no, that's not the right kind of stitch. That will fall apart after a couple washes, because it's not designed for that kind of hold. And most sewers are going to know that, know the type of stitching. But if you're outsourcing and just say, hey, I just need some seams, they're not going to realize that, right? So this is where your expertise comes in, where you can then talk to a customer, say, okay, what do you think? This is how we got to do it. And on that, it's a more expensive stitch, but it has more durability, right? So these are some of the things where suddenly you realize, like, okay, what does the customer think is too costly? When does, you know, triple stitch end up going to single stitch, like a pair of shorts at Old Navy that falls apart after one wash, right? That's single stitch, right? So, but when you're paying $5 for a piece of clothing from a store, then you get Old Navy falling apart because it's only one stitch design, and then you start seeing the difference. You can see how I feel about Old Navy. Anyway, but this is where you start understanding, how does the customer think? If I'm making a business decision, what are the risks? What's getting me afraid of how this solution is going to work for my customers? As I start thinking about what excites the customer, what am I trying to create that to gain? What is going to help them have a better day? What is going to be the delight factors? That in services marketing classes, you hear about marketing as theater, and what are the delight factors that you put in? Think like how, and that's how I think about the above and beyond. These are factors that aren't just kick the tire. It's like, holy cow, that just changed the way I think about my day. That just changed the way I do my job. That's how great that tool is, or that's how great your product or solution is, right? So that's where you're looking for how you change the way the customer even thinks. So like, think back to when iPod first came out from Apple, right? There were already MP3 players on the market. The way they changed the interface is what made the iPod such a great product, because people didn't even realize, oh, wow, this is cool. It's simple. I can flip through my music. iTunes, I can now download it easily. And it changed the way people interacted with music, even though all of those tools existed for 3 to 4 years prior to Apple. But they made the interface and the user design so great, it created gains that people didn't even realize they needed, right? So at the end of the day, as you start thinking about this value proposition canvas, what you're trying to do is think, which segment am I talking about? What is it that they're doing? what are the gains and pains that they're looking at, and then how do I connect the dots to my solution? How do I show my solution solves for those pains or creates those delight factors? And that's where you start telling your story, right? What are the benefits directly related to the customer? And unfortunately, where most entrepreneurs fail is they go in and they're selling their idea based on their personal experience, right? And they're not going in and saying, hey, here's how this will benefit you and create this wonderful experience. So Erica has been doing a great job with this at the Stitch Factory, and I'm gonna give her some shout outs, because one of the things that the prior owners of one of the businesses she acquired was one client that they were doing full shipping and fulfillment. She went back to other customers and said, hey, you know, one way I can really make your life easier is if you outsource all of that to me. And they're like, why would I do that? Well, think about how much it costs you to spend your time responding to e-commerce orders every day. What if I can just go from manufacturing to customer for you? We take that all in-house. We'll set up inventory. We'll do tracking. We'll take care of shipping and fulfillment, and we'll even handle customer service. They're like, you can do that? Yeah, sure. But I need a annual contract, and you're going to pay a stipend on top of any of your manufacturing costs. Well, what did that do? Now Erica's got residuals every month that come in, right? Regardless of sales volume, she's now got contracts coming in on top of the cut and sew manufacturing. And by doing both apparel, which is small batch, right? Like she can't win against China, Indonesia, et cetera, in manufacturing clothes at high volume, but specialty, small volume, high quality, she can win that any day, right? For the commercial clients, it's a very different game, and things like RF welders become actually really important in her delivery of sewing products there, and that's something that most sewing operations don't have, which she happens to have on site. And that was why one of the acquisitions was really important to bring in for that, right? Because a service that going to a client saying, hey, we have RF welding available for your sewing products, who cares? That's not a pain point. That's not how they're thinking about their pain point. But changing the molecular structure of the fabrics by using an RF welder so that seam can, here's a bad example, but one that you'll get immediately. Body bags have zippers, right? You don't want anything leaking out of a body bag, so you don't want traditional stitching. You need RF welding on a body bag, right? And that is one of, like, when you start thinking about medical products that are cut and sew application, you have to start thinking about that. And that's not, you don't go in and say, well, we can weld it. That's not what a customer's thinking. They just don't want leakage, right? And medical gowns, same thing. There's types of products that are done in cut and sew, not using traditional stitching, right? And so those more modern stitching provide the value, but that's not how you sell the value. So a lot of this gets back to how do you start thinking about how you translate your story in relation to what the pain points the customers are actually having. So